All right, hey guys. So tonight we're going to look at a night vision product. I've only ever tried to do one other night vision video, and I failed to the point that it never went on YouTube at all. But that's a whole separate story. So for this one, we don't actually need to look through the nods to make this work. So I have the capability to do it. All right, so an account on Instagram reached out to me. Noodles. I'll try to put a link in the description here, but Noodles reached out to me, and they're selling this Modnod setup, which is pretty interesting, and it can simplify life a lot if you are using nods recreationally for the most part, but not without value if you are issued or have department nods or something like that. So the way the nod mod comes, or the Modnod, sorry, I'm going to get that wrong a bunch of times, is you have two main pieces here. You have the piece that attaches to the lens of your night vision, and then you have kind of this end cap, and then you also have their anti-reflection device, as well as these two grub screws, if you will. All right. If you have any other questions, by the way, when this is done, go hit up their website. They explain it probably better than I'm going to. But there's also a couple of spacer rings that can go in here, depending on whether or not you're using it to its full potential. So the spacer rings essentially eliminate the voids that are left over by not using all of the capability. So the whole thing is kind of built around, one, you have the anti-reflection device, which is a capability by itself, right, to cut down on the shine off of your lenses. They are sized to be slightly smaller than airsoft BBs, but the gentleman that makes this, I think he says he has not tested it against BBs yet. So if you're using it as actual protection for the lens, I would absolutely do that before installing it on your nods. Because that'd be a real shame to assume it works and then find out that it doesn't. But the system is kind of designed to hold this aperture system here, which they do all the legwork for you. They have the link to where you can purchase this on the description for the item itself, which is super convenient, especially for somebody like me that's going to mess it up if you don't spoon feed me. So they've got the lens aperture, which is a microscope lens aperture. And then this kind of sacrificial lens here, which they also have the link to the website there, so that is all set up for you. Oh, goodness. Okay, so the way it works is, at least with the setup that I have, and I don't know 100% if it's one-for-one swap, but you can kind of either use the anti-reflection device or the sacrificial lens. So as I was messing around with my goggles, I noticed that my lenses here are also threaded, so I can kind of cheat the system, and I can screw the sacrificial lens into that. I don't get much bite on that, but it ended up not mattering because it was completely inside the unit and it didn't get in the way. So, but I've got that going for me, so I could, in theory, use all three. But if you're using it kind of as it comes, you take the threads of the sacrificial lens and you pop them into this outermost piece, and just through friction that kind of locks in there, right? So it's free spinning to an extent, and it would absolutely pop back out if that was all you were working with. But once that's in there, then you can drop your lens aperture in, and that will kind of keep that in place. There is a little bit of installation with the aperture itself. So you've got this tiny threaded lever here, which is how you open and close the aperture. So you just need to make sure that's lined up in this groove. So one of the spacer rings that it comes with will seal that groove if you're not using the aperture. And you'll notice with that installed, there's not room for the kill flash, if you will, to go in there. So with this setup, it's one or the other. So once you have your aperture in there and you've got the throw lever installed, then you take kind of the other half of this assembly and you line up the grooves there, and there are these notched portions and then corresponding notches on this outer piece. And that'll kind of seal everything together there. And then you take your set screws or grub screws, whatever you want to call them, and drop those in the opposing holes there. And that will hold everything together, keeps front and back together so nothing falls out of this setup. All right, and it's not really loose. That's just the aperture moving around because I don't have the throw lever in there. So once that's all done, then that will fit over the lens of your night vision goggle and keep it all there. I will say, this fit tighter when I had all the screws in it, and you can, I don't know if it'll be apparent, but like this has a much more positive lockup to it. Still a little bit loose, at least on my lenses, but that's nothing that, you know, like a tiny piece of electrical tape around the edge here wouldn't, you know, provide all of the tension that you need to hold that on there. It is kind of interesting the way the grub screw appears to give it just a little bit of a tighter fit once it's all put together. But so you can see kind of the two extremes here. You've got your aperture and your sacrificial lens, and that'll fit on there. Or you can have just your kill flash, or just your aperture, or even just your sacrificial lens if you wanted. And then that all, you know, as a unit pops onto your goggles there. So if for whatever reason the kill flash isn't working out for you, or you don't want the aperture on there, or you don't need the sacrificial lens because maybe you're not training and you don't want another lens to potentially have schmutz on it, you just pull the whole thing off and then you're back to your nods as issued. So if you had shared nods or something like that, this is a good solution too, because, you know, you pull them from supply. Maybe you don't necessarily always have the same set of goggles. Throw on your Modnod and then you are good to go. So I have not messed around with a ton of night vision accessories. I do enjoy using night vision. I am by no means a night vision SME. It's been well over a decade since I've worked on them on any regular basis. Not necessarily used, but had any knowledge on the inner workings. But for the $55 that the assembly costs, plus the minimal costs for the sacrificial lens and the aperture, I think for right around $100, you're all set up. And then you've got, you know, somewhat of a daytime lens with your aperture all the way closed. You've got that near far focus capability that you get with like the Butler Creek caps and the hole in the end of it, or some of the much more Gucci aperture systems out there. And you're all set up to just drop that on your nods right away. So I think it's a pretty cool product, pretty cool pricing system, right? You can kind of piecemeal it. You get $55 and then you can buy the parts as you need it. You don't necessarily have to buy the sacrificial lens because you've got the kill flash, but I would definitely test that if you're doing anything with personal nods for sure, so that you know whether or not that's actually going to stop something. It's not a flimsy 3D printed product by any stretch. It's not moving at all. I can't feel any of the cells collapsing at all. So I think from any reasonable distance, a BB is not going to penetrate that. It may shatter a cell, but it'll stop the BB first, or slow it down enough that it's not going to bust up your nods. And then you kind of know, okay, I gotta figure out what I'm doing before I ruin my nods. But you can use that or the sacrificial lens and the aperture. It's a cool package. Check it out.